You can watch us in English only, and our main channel of interaction is our chat. So please send your questions there, and we will cover them after the main part during our Q&A session. And as usual, just a couple of words about the project that we launched with the beginning of the war in Ukraine. So International Expert Sharing. It's a series of lectures with best minds and experts who share their thoughts and knowledge with us. And we hope that this knowledge will bring new streams and ideas to our listeners. So today I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest speaker, Henning Dreger, senior ESG professional with over 26 years of global experience in ESG, on leading roles at Goldman Sachs, World Wildlife Fund, and Birkenstock, specializing in sustainable transformation, net zero strategies, and ESG risk integration. And the title of our meeting today is Why and What ESG, Triple Approach of Sustainable Business Practices, People, Planet, Profit. And in today's interconnected world, issues of climate change, social inequality, corporate reporting are increasingly studied. And the integration of ESG principles by organizations is not just a choice, but a strategic necessity for a sustainable growth and sustainability. Investors are considering ESG criteria when making investment decisions. Regulatory bodies are implementing ESG reporting requirements. Companies are under pressure from stakeholders, including customers, employees, and communities, to operate sustainably and responsibly. And today we will talk about the features and importance of ESG, as well as the impact of these principles on people, business, and society. Henning, greetings from brave Kiev, and handing over to you.
Thank you, Valeria, and Slava Ukraini, everybody. I hope you're well, despite everything you're going through. You know, I had the great pleasure to live in your beautiful country for several years, left when the war started, relocated to Romania, Bucharest, and then over a year now, I've been living in Cologne, working for the Birkenstock company. I'm not representing them today. I'm bringing my general knowledge, but I just wanted to say, we are thinking of you, we are with you, we're following you. Don't feel that you're forgotten. You, the ESG, CSR, sustainability practitioners, whether you're in business, NGO, governments, there's really a great solidarity from where I can see here in Europe to want to continue to support. Can sometimes in the news be forgotten a little bit with Gaza and everything that's going on. But I just wanted to start by saying, because we're talking environmental, social, and governance, and we cannot obviously blind out the world events on that. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for Valeria and all of the colleagues in the Tech Academy for inviting me. So I would really like to share with you my experiences of how we apply ESG over the next 20, 30 minutes. And I would really like to, first of all, ask Valeria whether the format should be more dynamic, so that we are waiting after each section for questions to come, or whether you would like me to present in one go and then we leave the questions.
Henning, let's make it in one go, and then we will have Q&A sessions, and then we will come back to
you can just please ask the questions as Valeria said in there. So let's start. Let's start. Where do we always start? We start at the beginning, right? So you might think ESG, oh no, another alphabet soup, CSR, SASB, GRI, IFRS, IASB, and you could be right. Even people that have worked with this for 26 years now, it's really not easy to sometimes see what are we actually doing in our reporting, the way we plan our project, and why all these acronyms? Why is this now coming? So hopefully over the next 20, 30 minutes, I can enlighten you in practitioner steps, because I have to enlighten my colleagues at Birkenstock and when I work for BDO Ukraine as well, what this concept means and what it is and what it isn't and how it's connected. So hopefully we can learn something together, and I'd really like to hear your feedback. So let's just accept, oh no, another acronym, but there's help at hand. Because, quite simple, I'm sure you've all looked into it. What does it stand for? Basically, the ESG concept was created so that companies, and it is mainly 4 companies as the key stakeholder to look at how is your impact on the environment, what are you doing to mitigate this impact, and how could you maybe even improve it by reducing your CO2 emissions, go into more circular waste streams, attract funding for better technologies that you can use to minimize your environmental exposure and indeed cost. That's the E. The S, social. Hey, haven't we all been through COVID? I mean, do I need to say more? If we don't treat the people that create the value, unless you are all automatic and you all have robots, and even there you have humans watching the robots, if we don't look at social capital, as the investors say, and appreciate this instead of depreciating it and using it, whether it's through health and safety, mental health, whatever. And I mean, I don't have to tell you how important that was. I was in Kiev under COVID, and the support we had was just quite incredible from the BDO company. And I just feel that that is often overlooked. We have some regulations around social, but think about simply how can we appreciate the capital that's generating the financial and all the other impacts. And thirdly, and that's where ESG is different, as I'll talk to you about in a minute, from CSR, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability, because it puts so who's now responsible for environmental and social, and how do we bring it together with the financial impacts? The G is all about how do we integrate our environmental impact, social impact into our governance and management so that we can not only look at the risks that they create, but also how we mitigate them and maybe adapt to them. So just so ESG is not just a simple project out here in the periphery, it's right there where you do your management and risk analysis. That makes this proposition much stronger, in my opinion, than just doing CSR or sustainability. But let me explain. So before we get to that, so where did it come from? I remember from all the presentation that I did in Kiev and other places in beautiful Ukraine. Start at the beginning. So interestingly, my first job at Goldman Sachs as a sustainability risk analyst, this is way before the ESG topic came up. I remember my manager came by and said, bloody hell, we really don't understand this sustainable development goals, this fluffy, not tangible thing. I need to put something in a spreadsheet. I'd like to manage it. And I know this is simplified, but as he said, these lofty and completely fuzzy sustainability aims, I want to put them in a format where I can measure them and work with them so that I can then apply them in the real, and you know what the expletive is, world. Interesting, because it's, if you Google the origins of ESG, often much later than 1998. But I remember in my first job already hearing about it and then forgetting about it. But all you need to understand it is the investor world. It is the fund manager world, which basically has taken everything the sustainability world, the CSR world has done, and has said, okay, so how can we then assess the risk of us investing in a company or divesting from a company or putting more funds in a company? If I have 2 equal companies, they are performing equally well from a financial point of view. What are the environmental, social, and governance risk or opportunity factors which might just tip my decision over the top? So it is from the investor world that this ESG has come into our space, and as I believe, will transform the way we look at these issues, the way we look at the processes and document them, the way we audit them, and then, of course, at the very end, how we report them and how we then improve our performance. So that's a little, but plenty of information on Google. Other search engines are available. Just again to clarify, and again, there's no hard and fast understanding. If some of you on the call are from the Big Four or indeed from BDO or others, you might have slightly different definitions. So the way my understanding is, ESG will provide, as you can see here, a clear framework for assessing my company's performance. So if I set myself targets, if I look at my material impacts, I'm a huge chemicals company, I've got huge energy exposure, I've got many CO2 emissions. If I don't have that on my radar, how can I address them? To me, framework. Sustainability, yeah, probably still a little bit fuzzy. You guys, some of you might not be as old as me, but it goes all the way back to the Brundtland report, where sustainability was defined, or sustainable development We need to consider the decisions we're making as companies, households, societies, as a world that doesn't impede the need for future generations to make similar or at least this, or ideally the same choices. Access to healthcare, access to infrastructure, a livable planet, a livable world, being able to travel, low, green energy availability, and so forth. And then there's this third category, and that's where I started in my career early on. Some people decry it as social hugging or tree hugging. Basically, the CSR has become a lot more sophisticated. At the beginning, it was simply, here's a pot of money, I'm giving it to you, home for orphan children, and I'll support you. But I don't look at how do you improve the lives. I make some photo opportunities, I write some media reports, it's all good. But I don't look at, do I actually improve the lives of the people and the children that I support? So this accountability, this governance part is not there, which is why they are related. But I feel if you take the governance aspect to sustainability and to CSR, you can really take a much longer, medium and longer term view, which we need to from a sustainability point of view. We're talking 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. None of us will, or many of us will not be available, but that's what sustainability is asking us for. Not 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. Hard to do when you're at war, of course, but to have this perspective. And that's why I would recommend, based on my little experience of 26 years and still learning, look at ESG maybe as a framework to clarify your activities and really structure them and the processes underneath them well. That way you explain your sustainability and CSR objectives much better. So always very important. So any evidence that it works, any evidence around the world that what are the risks, what are the opportunities? Well, I'll be very, very straightforward with you, Valeria. You said earlier, investors are asking for, you are absolutely right. We said the ESG criteria came from the investor world. If you look at the EU-Ukraine plan, and if you look at the big banks, the EBRD, and all the Western lending institutions, they tie more and more ESG-style criteria. Are you doing any reporting? Are you certifying your products? Have you got genetically modified foods in your product chain in order for you to access capital or have partnerships? So here, taking an ESG point of view, if you can govern your reporting, your certification, your readiness to engage with the risks and opportunities that are environmental and social, alongside your financial statements, there is evidence that, at least in the West, that lenders are more favorable lending to you, especially with long-term commitments. That's one. Second point, risk management. I don't have to tell you about the importance of transparency, anti-corruption, general risk management. And it is absolutely true that if Ukraine chooses to look more to the West, and I assume that is the case for most, from everything that I've learned, then there's no way to get around the fact that your activities need to not only be documented, but you need to put them into a more formalized risk management framework. Not every company has those, especially the smaller ones, haven't invested in what they call an ERM, but we measure operational risks, we measure strategic risk. Why shouldn't we also measure our environmental and social risk and see how they might impact our future cash flow? Write it down, the processes, get the data, start reporting internally, and obviously, if you are in scope, for instance, as in some of the European regulations, you would have to audit everything. Means basically you put it in your engine room of the company. The third point, and again, please laugh at me or say this is absolutely not relevant in Ukraine, but some evidence from a number of EU and North American HR surveys, more not only millennials, what's the next generation? Generation Z, I think, right? Are asking for, I'd like money, I'd like professional development, I'd like flexibility, working from home, whatever. And by the way, can also get some corporate volunteering. What's the company doing beyond making money for producing this or providing this service? So if you do all this work around ESG, might it be an idea to remind your current employees about what you're doing exactly, how it's measured, what the impacts are, so that they can feel a nice glow. At least it seems to work more and more in the Western, not war-ravaged areas of the world. Talent attraction, definitely something to consider. And last but not least, transparency, anti-corruption. You can't just say something, you need to back it up, meaning write it down, look at all the risks and opportunities, and report them. First of all, internally, so that everybody understands from management down. But secondly, share with the outside world. I mean, look at all the great Ukrainian companies, what they're doing for the Ukrainian forces, for instance. It's an absolute inspiration, and the long-term planning around that. I mean, here's money, here are the activities, here's how we're supporting them, and we will continue to support and report back. This is something from a Western transparency point of view that I can tell you that's worth its weight in gold. If it's not reported, then it hasn't happened. And if it's not backed up, it also is just PR. And that's something we need to get around. We need to get away from, because the governance says truthful, evidenced statements, targets. So these are the opportunities. But some of you might also have seen that there are a number of challenges with ESG. I don't want to make it sound like it's really easy and, you just jump into it, that's it. No, we have skeptics. I just looked to the United States. Former President Trump and all the supporters in the Republican parties thinks this is just a lot of, and I won't use the expletive, guff, red tape, more reporting requirements that companies that are in the business of doing business, in other words, making money, should not really look at. And all this environmental and social stuff, this is something they shouldn't care about. There are people who think, why should we take governance for our environmental and social impacts? No. And then, as you can see here, many stakeholders involved. It's becoming political. We have some critical media, in particular out of, for instance, Australia and the United States. Often ESG is, as I mentioned earlier, used for greenwashing. So it's simply just, look at what we've done. We've donated this. What has the impact been? Has this been verified that it has been received, and so forth? So quite much room for interpretation. Secondly, we are still probably a decade to a decade and a half away from a global standard for what ESG reporting should be like. I've just outlined my view. I'm not the regulator. I'm not the IFRS. I'm not the IASB. I'm not the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US or the European Commission. I just follow it. And fact is that many companies and stakeholders, non-governmental organizations, rating companies are asking, we need one set so that we can assess at least the basic environmental, social, and governance criteria for all companies, whether they are startups or whether they are Detect size, Interpipe size, Verexpo size. Should be possible, because that's what happened with financial accounting standards. But some people think that's still a decade to a decade and a half off, so we will watch this space. But unless there's standardization coming in also for ESG, it will be difficult, because we will all have this different interpretation, what needs to be reported. Yeah, and then last but not least, in the blue quadrant, I've given you a few examples from a practitioner's point of view, what one could look at. I mean, what's coming? How does it break down in terms of the reporting format, the material issues? Have you got any internal knowledge at your management level, at your board level? Do you need to hire any ESG team? Can you outsource it? Always ask your main stakeholders. I mean, who are they? Are they your investors? Are they your employees? Are they, hopefully they're both. Who are they? Have you identified them? Have you asked them what kind of risks and opportunities do they see in connection with what you are doing? And then just make sure that you report this based on what you are good at, the service or the product that you are providing. And saying also, honestly, I'm at the beginning of this journey. We read that a lot in many reporting contexts. Sustainability is a journey. It's not a goal. It's not an end. It's a journey. Yeah, but at some point we need to arrive collectively in order to meet our GHG emission targets, the move to the low carbon economy. whatever we collectively have decided is good for a livable planet and a socially responsible way of business practices. So just build on that, report step by step, but instead of just sticking their head in the sand and saying, nah, I'll do that when the economic situation is good. And we'll talk a little bit about the specific parameters of you guys in Ukraine with my little knowledge and with my monthly interaction with my colleagues still in Ukraine in a minute. So positive, negative, you need to weigh up. Wonderful. So concepts, and here, for those of you who would like to learn more about ESG, how do we get here? There are 3 things I would like to point out. This is not an academic exercise. This is really to inspire you to find out a bit more about how you could make ESG come alive. The first one is what we call the triple bottom line reporting. Sounds a bit like sustainability, does it not? Sounds a bit like CSR, does it not? We're looking at people, we're looking at planet, and we're looking at financial viability. I can only, and I've seen the book in Ukrainian, forgive me, I didn't have the screenshot. John Elkington, I'm a big fan, and he's a mentor of mine, wrote in 1992, Cannibal with Forks, where he explains it. It is still relevant today. So I can just tell you, if you wanted to really understand and make the arguments, in particular to skeptical colleagues in your organizations, whether you're NGO or whether you are a private business or a government institution, why your company and indeed why the Ukrainian society, the international society, should look at planet, people, and profit. And obviously, not everybody makes profit. A government institution is not profit-making, but the underlying principles are the same. So I bring that to you, but just say this came after the Brundtland report of sustainable development, but they're all interlinked. And for me in my career, this has been a really, really important piece of work to get started and also get my first job as a sustainability risk analyst. So have a look at that. And interesting here, they basically say, we always put money over everything else. Get with the program. Money rules the world. And yeah, money is very, very important. It finances the other 2. But can we continue to make money if we neglect the other 2? Should the question be. So we should be somewhere in the middle. But I know this is very, very hard. But let's start the conversation. And this book and this concept of triple bottom line is at the heart of ESG, would be my estimation. That's the first one I would recommend to you. Secondly, a very specific piece of legislation, piece of reporting. A fantastic report by the OECD. It's called the Due Diligence for Responsible Business Conduct. Why? Because one, it says, okay, you want to do ESG, or you want to do sustainable development in your company, or you want to do responsible business practices. Well, here's a guideline based on the best approach. Thousands of companies and government institutions and NGOs have fed into this to say, how do we take our social and environmental aspects of ESG into our hand, define them, put them in a way so that they can be scrutinized internally, thus due diligence, before we eventually end up reporting them. A really good, if a bit complex, guide to that. And where you have a supply chain, and who hasn't got a supply chain, right? Detect, you guys, you have a supply chain. We at Birkenstock, we have a supply chain. How do we interact with our colleagues in our supply chain so that our reporting as the mothership becomes better? Really, really good. Again, social aspects, environmental aspects. How do we manage them? ESG. If you haven't read that yet, I think it's available in Ukrainian language as well. I put the link in the, I was just about to say show notes. This is not a podcast. I put the link in there. This is a really important piece of guidance. In particular, even if you are not a big multinational company, it also works for SMEs. It absolutely does. So have a look at that and see if you can get some guidance, structure, and clarity around how you might want to approach it. Because you have to do the due diligence before you go external. Otherwise, the auditor will do that for you, and then it's a little bit too late. So that's the second one. And thirdly, I want to point you to a specific piece of regulation. And please don't be scared and don't read all the details here that I've written. You can do that later. If you say, Henning, ESG, so where does that come to the fore? I mean, where in the world? I'd say the European Sustainability Reporting Directive. We are grappling with it at Bergenstock. Many, many, many thousands of companies, including in Ukraine, are grappling with it because they are in scope. It's very, very complex, but it's really beautiful because it has all the aspects I just talked about. Triple bottom line, due diligence, connectivity between financial performance, future, any environmental aspects, for instance, on climate change impacts, availability of talent, supply chain upstream, downstream. It is, and asking the people who use the information that we as companies put out. We think this is important based on our industry context. What do you think? Asking my key stakeholder here, here, here. I've got evidence, and I can then check, am I on the right track? Do I need to improve my communication with that particular stakeholder group so that I wrap it in a beautiful, even if I'm not in scope, wrap it in a beautiful ESG matrix so that I can honestly demonstrate to anybody out there, I've understood the concept. I have considered many interlinking things. I've educated myself, and I can now with confidence say, nothing's 100% bulletproof, but I have a plan of how to move forward under these circumstances, whether it's war, lack of finance, lack of talent, greater environmental impacts, lack of access due to occupied territories. That's all in there. And for us in the European Union, even though we're grappling with it, this is really a godsend, even though it's very, very complex and we are still grappling with it. I recommend it to you. The text is available in 27 languages, hopefully soon Ukrainian, of course. So have a look at that. And again, I would offer to everybody who is available, although I'm no longer an advisor, I'm a practitioner, to share your ideas, share your concerns, just ask some questions, because we need to tackle this together, because I think this might be the blueprint. From what I see in North America, even China is looking at this as a way of opening the markets and demonstrating sustainability, economic and environmental and social conduct. And for that, it's really fantastic. So I commend them to you. So how do we then use them? I was asked to give examples of, if you, for instance, are a listed company, you are at the stock exchange in Warsaw, like some Ukrainian companies are in Luxembourg, in London, in New York. Investors have screens, they've got platforms where, and I've given you here an example of how the investors are increasingly engaging with ESG topics. From left to right, no engagement to proxy contest, basically saying at the annual general meeting, we are not voting for that manager because of that ESG violation, or we would like to increase the expertise of the board, the management team, by voting a new external director onto the board in order to help them navigate the CSRD, other regulation, or just getting to grips with the ESG topics that are there. This is happening. Yes, finance still dominates. If your financial metrics are all okay and your environmental and social metrics are half okay, then mostly it goes on. But we see more and more activity that before an investment is made, this is the kind of process that they're going through, and then they give you a score. So how do they get that information? They can either do it themselves, or they go to the lovely canopy of rating agencies. You might have heard of some of these: MSCI, S&P Global, Bloomberg, Refinitiv. Basically, if you're an asset manager and you invest in companies, you're a fund manager and you invest in a portfolio of funds, you're an NGO like Greenpeace and you would like to know a little bit more about the CO2 emissions of a BP, Shell, dare I mention Gazprom back in the days, and then you go there. Governments to just check, is everything okay in the sector? Media, of course, to write stories where things don't go right. And you yourself, if you're a private business, even if you're an NGO, interestingly enough, you can work with them to let them assess how ready are you on environmental, social, and governance criteria. And then you get a score. And I'll have a little example. Don't get scared. From our friends in Poltava, Farexpo, and it says here country, region, Switzerland. That's just because they are registered there, but they're from Poltava. An example from Sustainalytics, where due to the war and only to the war and access to alternative, from what I can read in the report, access to alternative routes, Ferrexpo PLC was, as you can see, labeled with a very high risk, so a score between 30 and 40. So companies, managers use Sustainalytics or many other scores, and they're not always aligned. So you could have the same company being high risk, but you go to MSCI and you get low risk because they will not tell you the methodology behind. You need to become a customer in order to understand that. And having worked with many of them, I still don't understand fully, but okay, fine. But this is being used more and more as an additional criteria after the financial bribery, the E and S governance. So just be aware, not just for the big guys, FedExpo. I believe Detect, you also have a score here. And just an example, this will become more and more. And I believe when the war's over and we've won, we've got all our territory back, the rebuild starts in earnest. It'll probably go easy on the scoring, but eventually, if Ukraine chooses to be integrated into the European Union, then this is daily fare. So we might as well at least think about it now, even though we are still at war, thus that this rating, this will continue to happen, and they will take into account the grim circumstances that Ukraine is in at the moment. Wonderful. And very practical. You're a company. Yeah, sounds good. I'm convinced I'd like to invest a bit more. I've read the triple bottom line. I read the OECD guidelines. So how do I then start producing it? And I'll give you an example of something that I've seen in many, many, many reports. I call it the ESG sandwich. So the way to describe it is you start with your product or your service, so your description, and that's the one bun. And the lower bun is, your values, you've identified your purpose. Hopefully you've created an ESG strategy. Where do you want to be in the short, medium, or long term? You might have set targets for your material or important issues, those issues that really impact on the environment and society. And if you don't tackle them, it will have a financial impact. So what they call double materiality assessment. And very important, you explain how this ESG approach is integrated into your sales, your corporate strategy for sales, market share, wider development, basically. And then you have the meat or the soya, if you are vegetarian, in the middle. The environmental block. You get together a big group of diverse people and you really talk about, and I'll give you an example here, carbon emissions, waste management, responsible sourcing. Where do I get my materials from? What's my product impact? Do I need to do life cycle analysis so that I don't always source, manufacture, put it out and it gets burned when it comes back? Maybe I can find alternative ways to make it more circular so that my waste products become part of the next product, either in my own chain or on a different chain. But if I don't investigate, we will just throw away. Make, use, throw away. That's not the point of the CSRD and more progressive regulation. So that's the environmental part. Social, we know this if we've already done sustainability and CSR reporting under the social. Diversity and inclusion, where you think that's important. Supply chain transparency, workplace engagement, surveys, mental health support post-COVID, enabling flexible working if that is required, unless your productivity can markedly drop off. A commitment to innovation research, and just to say, so why should a future employee work for you? What we call social value add, just to define that. And then governance, how do we then manage the E and the S? Our relationship with our suppliers. What should our management say and live so that all those engaged with this, ideally everybody in the company, is following it? What are our anti-corruption and bribery practices? How are we managing the social and environmental impacts if we have own productions or contract manufacturing in China, in Australia, in Moldova, wherever we might be. And certification. So remember, we talked about you need to evidence. So if I say I want to be sustainable, I want to be really ESG focused, I need to produce evidence. Do I need to adopt an ISO certificate? Do I really need to get an auditor in to verify my claims? In particular, if I want to sell into the European Union, where we now have a new direction called the Greenwash Directive, where when you claim I'm organic, I'm not GMO, I am transfer, so I'm supporting diminished communities by paying a higher wage to them than I'm normally required. The European Union will say, evidence for that. Please, independent audit report, certification, unannounced audits, and so forth. So for me, again, that is what we call the ESG sandwich. A lot of work between all three layers, but that's a really practical way. And I'm sure many of you on the call will have already done the reporting or have gone through the exercise. You have ticked many of those boxes, but it's the evidence and the connectivity between them that then translates into a risk assessment or opportunity assessment. That's what I feel is often missing. And hey, but we're getting there step by step. Another example, and again, forgive me, I should have searched on the Ukrainian web, but more and more current employees and more potential employees go to ESG scoring sites where culture, working conditions, environmental and social awareness, and activities and diversity is scored. So Rheinmetall, one of the great German producers of defensive weapons, also used in Ukraine. You go to the website of Kununu, try to say that 10 times really fast, quite fun. And more and more, as I said earlier, companies or employees existing and where you can type in your experience and then you're rated. And this is coming up more and more in the world. So another example of if you don't have environmental or social awareness, or you don't have a view on diversity, yet you want to get into that market, or you might even want to attract the talents from that market, then basically that will be blank. And evidence has shown that you're just incomplete. Why? What have you got to hide? Why are you not doing that? Then say, not important for us. We're at work. We're at war. But leaving it is not a question. So just an example. And last but not least, you know these NGOs. More and more NGOs are not just, doing their own investigative research. They're really digging into the ESG reports from the rating agencies, whether they're Greenpeace or Leave Russia or or European Association of Ethical Shareholders or activist group around the world. Siemens and Adani is a big, I think, harbor in Australia that was going to be created for coal shipments from Australia to China, to India and others. And Siemens did the rail from the mine to the port and the company paying them is Adani. So just an example, the more ESG information we put out there, the more it will be used positively if we have something good to say or we're honest, or negatively if we don't have. So again, that's how civil society will use these kind of disclosures. So key regulations. I will leave this timeline. I'll gladly, by the way, share this presentation, Valeria and Team Detect. So I will leave that to you just to say, all we can say, it picked up from 97. And we are seeing more and more regulations. If I'm just through our screening tool that we use in my company, we are seeing Argentina, Malaysia, South Africa. We are seeing Canada. We are seeing China. We are seeing from everywhere ESG mandatory regulations, or many find inspiration in the big European pieces, which I'll come to in a minute. So I bet if we meet again in 10 years' time, we'll say, you say as acceleration and regulation in the last 3 years on national and international level, it's quadrupled, even though the world economy has gone to onto a slower pace. I'm sure this is something that cannot be stopped. So we might as well be prepared for it. So the big ones, well, there are many, many small ones and many, we're not talking about local environmental regulations that you need to meet anyway. We're talking the big reporting ones, and the ones that I would really, if you have time, bring close to your heart. I mentioned it before, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It's the mothership of all disclosures. I would hasten a guess that if you get that right, if we collectively as reporters get that right, we can meet almost anything that's thrown at us. Secondly, just from the US, it's just come in from the state of California. They have a state and federal laws. So the state of California and the Securities and Exchange Commission both want a climate risk report, so which is audited, so that they know that companies operating in the United States and foreign companies with a certain threshold, how they impact the activities in the United States and their supply chains. Very, very interesting, again, also to have a look at. And the rest, which are just listed there, whether it's the United Kingdom, Modern Slavery Act, anti-waste law for circular economy out of France, deforestation directive, are you sourcing leather, latex from areas which will be further deforested around the world? EU taxonomy, how sustainable are your activities? This is part of the CSRD, the greenwashing directive, and some German ones. Plenty. But the top three, and if you should pick one of the top three, I would say look at the CSRD and look at it in detail. I believe Ukrainian translations are also available. Once you understand that, don't get frustrated. We are still, but we're getting there. And it will be exciting when we get the first reports out next year for the CSRD, how that looks like. We will report in 26. So yeah, so that's good. And then just a little bit more detail on what the other regulations look like. You don't have to read that in more detail. So, which brings me to my last piece, and that is, listen, I'm not you. I don't sit in Ukraine. But my understanding and talking to you at DTech, talking to the EBA, talking to my colleagues at the BDO in Ukraine and my friends there. Let's be honest. ESG, sustainability, CSR, it's bloody hard to do this work while you're at war because you're impeded at every level. I get it. So don't say anything that I said is much easier when you don't have this war hanging over you. We get it, or I get it. So no rush. Secondly, just be aware that you don't forget about governance and transparency. I know there's already a big fight from Zelensky, and forgive me if I talk out of turn on these issues, President Zelensky, but governance and transparency will be absolutely key for the European Union to allow Ukraine to come into the European Union. And NATO, I would also think. So these issues, being open about what you do, not having murky ways of where funding might come from or an old mindset, is something that the Ukrainian society needs to decide how it wants to tackle. ESG is only part of it. But as you see, ESG governance, explain to me, what have you done? Where's your transparency? Has it been audited? Whether that is in trading practices, transfer pricing, or here environmental and social. They will knock on your door and say, please demonstrate. ESG, if you want to call it something else, you want to continue calling it CSR or responsible business or sustainability, be my guest. It's just an acronym. But remember the G. Who is managing it? How deep does my analysis go? How wide have I approached my supply chain? Have I set any targets to enable progress? I set financial targets for myself, recruitment targets for myself. So why shouldn't I set environmental, especially if I wanted to, again, get into the European Union and into this whole system? Short, medium, long-term targets. For that, you need peace, yes. But just think about that. And add the G to your CSR, add the G to responsible business reporting and the way you approach it, because that will be absolutely key. And as I mentioned earlier, you can, of course, look at all three, triple bottom line, OECD guidelines, and the CSRD. But if you pick one of those and don't get frustrated, it's a complex and a long piece of work. But man, does it address many, many things. The language is not helpful in many places. We are also interpreting it slightly differently. But if that all comes together, we are ready and we can measure ourselves with any financial disclosure and hopefully eventually get to the point where we don't call it ESG reporting and financial reporting. We have this thing called integrated reporting. So a company, no matter what size, gives me a full set of report that has both environmental, social, financial, and how I manage those three and how they're interconnected. That's still some way off, but I guess that's our end game. And for that, I just say thank you for the opportunity to Detect and to all of you listening for sharing my few thoughts and much more interested in what you have to say. So, дуже дякую. Все буде Україна.
Thank you, Henning. Thank you, Henning, for this, I would say, huge starting pack of ESG basics knowledge. So while our colleagues are thinking about their questions, as I'm working with people, I will start. I have questions as well, and I will start with the S letter. You mentioned our post-conflict environment. What do you think? How can companies in Ukraine foster a more inclusive and diverse workplace? So especially in this post-conflict environment.
Oh man, you're going big. Wonderful. I don't want to share my really rather regressive experience I had in Ukraine with companies wanting around inclusion, female empowerment, and so forth. And I'm not a human resource director. I can only say, coming from a Western progressive Nordic point of view, look at the reporting companies, your peers in your industry in Europe. Look at their practices, look at their reporting, read it. You cannot force people, Valeria, to adopt a European liberal mindset if you might have a social conservative mindset. As a manager, the people who I guess manage that culture. But I mean, I can only look at if I can mention EBA here, and we know each other from the EBA before you joined Detect. The progressive attitude of our colleague Tanya approaching all this gave me real hope that the CSR committee and the social environmental issues we discussed, that could be disseminated. But to force a Western mindset down a Ukrainian throat on this is dangerous. I think that should be left up to you. I can only say I love diversity. I see it working. You ask me for evidence of how a culture is better with different cultural, religious, sexual, and other influences. I'll give you plenty of examples. Mm-hmm. But the culture needs to be receptive to these changes. Yeah. So how do you do this as a human resource expert? Do you discriminate in your recruitment to get more disabled colleagues to come in, to hire more women in management position? This is up to the individual company. I welcome this development, but start by looking at what your counterparts in Europe or North America, if you really like Black Lives Matters, if you look at, indigenous people and how minority groups were suppressed, how they have started reporting and what the evidence is below it. That hopefully will give plenty of inspiration if you are in an HR role. And I'm not telling them how to do that job. I'm not an HR expert. I just work with HR to say, oh, there's benefits in that. And eventually, this will end up in your reporting. And from my point of view, it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Henning. And talking about good things, so there is a trend in Ukraine, so having independent directors in the company's board. What is your opinion? What are the benefits of it?
The benefits of
having independent
directors.
Yes, in a company's board in our country.
That's easy. Ask more questions. I can just see the way independent directors are being used. In North American, European, Japanese, Australian setups. It's to add expertise and support the people on the board or even external consultants to the management to fill knowledge gaps, to ask difficult questions. We talked a lot about integration of environmental and social governance principles. It might be that the board or the management team says, hands up, we need to learn more. Should we invite an independent director with 12, 15, 17 years of experience to help us exactly with that and keep us to account? Surely that is the maybe idealistic role of an independent director. I've never been an independent director. I can only go by the people I know that are independent directors. And I must say, that's a good thing. If they're there to be critical and not yes women, yes men to the board and the management team. Whatever. The external director said that. No. They're there to play, to put on the hat of the stakeholders, direct stakeholders of the company, and advise the board or the management team. And some of them are, most of them are non-executive, so they can only advise. But they have experience, and hopefully they'll be listened to. So that's how I would use them.
Thank you. We have questions from our participants. So the first one is, which ESG initiatives have been implemented by Birkenstock? Any challenges your company has faced in implementing ESG initiatives?
Sorry, I cannot share that with you. I'm not here from Birkenstock. I'm here as Henning Draeger, ESG expert. No information will be divulged. Very happy to answer for other companies that I've either worked with or my previous companies, but I can't answer anything on behalf of Birkenstock.
So can I rephrase it in the following way? So what are the most common challenges Ukrainian companies face when implementing ESG initiatives?
Right. So I can go back to my time at EBA. There I mentioned that. And we had the same challenges at we had a CSR committee, which then was turned into an ESG committee. The same challenges was just, where is ESG or sustainability or CSR located? It's located under PR and communication, whether it's internal communication or even external communication. It's the wrong place. It needs to be under it needs to be under departments which have a traditional real standing and can make fast decision. Finance, reporting directly to the CEO, because it's a function that supports the entire company. So the challenge is, if you're just in communication, get me a feel-good story, get me an Instagram, get me some likes, we've seen that in the 10 years I was there, again and again, it didn't progress from there. But we as ESG experts, as professionals, we're equally valuable to the company as a finance, a logistics expert. We just need to make sure that we understand what the challenges are. We need to get data from somewhere in order to meet requirements. That means we need relationships. You need to have them first. Not everybody wants to talk to you because that's not my job. I want to work in this silo. We need to break them down. That's a huge challenge also in Western companies. Keep at it. Explain to them, well, there's regulation coming. We don't want to not meet the regulation, but we want to go onto the ESG beauty parade with evidence to attract funding from the West, to attract partnerships, to maybe pitch for a cement contract in Germany where they're asking for ESG statements alongside my financial history. Oh, we don't have that. Well, then you are not becoming a preferred supplier. Oh, isn't that interesting? So maybe I should start collecting data. Start thinking about what are your material impacts. If you're a big energy user, if you have lots of wastewater, if you have lots of waste, what are they? How are they currently managed? Are there a different way of managing them? Write down the processes. Which department needs to contribute to your reporting? And once you understand this whole setup internally, go to your management, go to your board. You know what? We need a pilot project here to investigate how we can, one, save money, and two, sell our waste to X. Oh, interesting. Okay. We'll do some calculations and go forward. And the last challenge, the biggest challenge, I would say, from everything that I've learned, if the management, if your board is not convinced, hasn't got time, isn't knowledgeable, or a combination of all these factors, you can be the best ESG expert. it will stay on your level. Wherever you are, whether you're in the communications team, you have a dedicated ESG team, you need a mentor. You need somebody to fight your case at that level in order for that. Okay. So you get fully integrated and it's really used that way. If that doesn't happen, it will always stay a pilot project. And sustainability, ESG, how can you manage something that's just managed outside the parameters of the wider business? For me, that makes no sense. So plenty of challenges, but these are the main ones.
Thank you. We're sure that there are ways out, of course. Next question. Is there a unified approach to ESG ratings and common criteria in the world or Europe? Can we compare our company with others? So our company, I think that's about the time.
No, there are not. I mentioned to you in the challenges around ESG reporting. We don't have standardized approaches yet. We have a regulator called the IFRS. They have created the International Sustainability Standards Board, and they're bringing out 2 guidelines. Again, this is recorded, so feel free to play it back. It's called IFRS 1 and 2. 1, it explains to you how any company of any size could structure their reportings. And then the second one is just around climate. What kind of metrics, what kind of approaches you should take in order to be compliant with the generic approaches to climate reporting. So that's a good start. The IFRS 1 and 2, I would say. I mentioned the CSRD earlier, but the rating, it's the same. We have done comparison back at BDO where we picked 5 random companies that are listed, went to 5 publicly available ratings. And they were, I mentioned Ferrexpo earlier, maybe Ferrexpo gets a really good score at MSCI, Ökom does something else. They are selling this report, I guess, to their customer. They will explain what the methodology is, but it's not uniform. Again, we will get there, but this will take time. So once you are with a provider, or don't listen to one over the other, see what you can find out in terms of their methodology. If you want to use it for yourself, then yeah, I mean, there are advisors available, Big Four, BDO, whoever, who can help you with that, or you do the research yourself. But just because one provider says you're very good doesn't mean that the other 4 or 5 or 6 say that you're equally good. But then there's no penalty for you to say this, because that provider, which is often a big company, S&P, Morningstar owns Sustainalytics, they say it. So, but we need to get there, because how can we do comparison of our reporting if the rating agency don't do the same thing? But I think they are working on it, but it will take some time.
Thank you, Henning. The next question. Many thanks for such great lectures. Yes, the colleagues are also grateful. We're currently working on ESG requirements to be sure we comply with them and what gaps we have. We have already read through the OECD corporate governance principle, due diligence directive, etc. However, we also would like to find some information on best practices, how big companies fulfill such ESG requirements. We would like to know how do they change the internal corporate structures, which internal policies they adopt, and so on. Maybe there are any good analytics regarding the practical issues on fulfillment of ESG requirements.
Well, it depends on what your ESG requirements are. If you've just used the OECD principles, and you have fully implemented them, you have a fantastic due diligence screen. And I don't know whether your company has a supply chain upstream, downstream. I assume it does. Then you are very well set up. So in terms of analytics and structure, corporate structure, that's really technical. So here, if that was to happen in my current employer, I would then get together with my legal team. I would get together with the operations team to say, we have these requirements which require us potentially to structure the way we collect data, and the quality of the data needs to be higher. How do we approach this? Because the ESG team cannot do it by itself. Here you really need to, if you really need to change your structure, or you need to create committees, very, very, very popular and very good way of doing ESG, do a committee, ESG reporting committee, for instance. Here you collect a group of 5, 6, 7 stakeholders, which are ideally with a sponsor from the management team. They meet every quarter, every 2 months to really address, okay, what do we need to meet in the future? What have we done? What's the quality? Have we described the processes? Have we invited an auditor to come in to look at our processes? And have we done an internal report, for instance? That to me is a really good and best practice way of doing it. Why? Because from every meeting of that committee, you have minutes and notes. Everybody signs them, meaning if I've given you 3 action points by 2 months from now, and you come back to the next committee meeting, and I have no idea, I was busy with doing logistics over here or something. No. Which is why us as ESG professionals, the structure of committees, although setting them up is a bit of a pain, but that's the way to manage even changes in reporting governance. And that's why I would wholeheartedly recommend, if whoever asked the question, if you haven't done that yet, consider it. Start with maybe a ESG committee, but as you grow, you might need more. You need an audit committee. You need a process committee. You need just a reporting committee for CSRD if you're in scope. But in the beginning, one committee, key stakeholders, minutes, everybody signs off on the action points so you know the work or the changes you want to see also get done. Otherwise, we are just stuck. And people's day job takes over. But that's the whole point of a committee. And yeah, that's what I would recommend as best practice. I can't point to a specific report or legislation apart from the CSRD. I would just say Google maybe what our colleagues in the Big Four in particular have done on these issues. And I know these are advisors and they obviously want to sell us more services, but they've done some really great thinking, whether it's EY, KPMG, Deloitte, or PwC on this. So if you just put it in, have a little look, maybe you use AI, ask where you could get a report and then look at it. And as always, look at your peers in Europe. Look at somebody that you really admire from a reporting point of view, another company, and see have they done anything. Great inspiration is to be had.
Thank you, Henning. One more question. What emerging trends in ESG should Ukrainian companies be aware of?
What trends? Well, I think I mentioned a few trends earlier. Mm-hmm. The regulation is the key trend. The CSRD, and I mentioned it earlier, even if you're not in scope, please, guys, have a look at it. Have a look at any condensed versions there might be. Again, contact me later. I'll send you what I've got on it. Once you tackle that, it's my firm opinion, with all my 26 years of experience, if we get that right, oh my God, we are really set up for ESG. We're really set up, but it will take several years for us to get ready. And then we make the improvement, we set the targets. The trends are, that piece of regulation is absolutely crucial to get that right at whatever firm size you are. You might not have to go into all detail, but go there. And in general, I mean, who are your stakeholders? If you have investors which are asking for more and more information, stakeholder engagement. Have you got an active stakeholder engagement? Have you got a plan? Have you identified them? Do you actually, when you do your materiality analysis, where you look at what is material to you in the context of your business or your organization, how does that impact directly which stakeholders and indirectly maybe their stakeholders? And what is the impact of those issues on your business strategy, on your further success? Have you got that all written down? Do you ask them that, we want to do this, what do you think? And then you can still ignore it, but at least you have evidence that you've asked them, you've discussed them. Oh, you're a very important investor. Oh, you want me to report this? Okay, why? Because of X, Y, Z. Oh, that makes sense. Let me integrate that in the way I collect data and present them in my CSR, ESG report, whatever it might be. Again, unfortunately, often I've seen in my experience in Ukraine, we put our own stakeholder hat on and assume the role because we can't really be. We either don't have time or we don't want to bother our suppliers, our investors or others with asking them because they have enough on their plate. But how do we then know? We don't know. We just assume they haven't asked, so they're not interested. Okay, so we don't report. That mindset, off. Show me that you've asked, They said, I don't care. Wonderful. Then you can go ahead and focus on these issues, because your counterpart didn't say, nah, I would like you to consider these issues. We looked at it, I rejected it, or I accepted it and put it into my reporting package. Get your stakeholder engagement right. And again, that's something we all struggle with, but it's very, very important and required by the CSRD, by the way.
Thank you, Henning. And more questions if you have time, because we are out.
Sure. Yeah. Listen, my day off. So you guys are all in your evening, well-deserved evening. So there you go.
Thank you. The top energy companies in the world very loudly declare the application of ESG, so the transition to sustainable development, and make statements about plans to become carbon neutral. They back up their statements with concrete actions and projects. However, if you compare the amount of investment in green and sustainable projects to the development of new oil reserves, for example, it can be concluded that green and sustainable projects are carried out as PR move to shape public opinion rather than being a serious measure for the green transition, as they constitute a tiny part of the company's investment costs. What needs to be done to truly change this situation?
If that's a public company, BP, not to pull them out, Exxon, BP, Imperial Oil in Canada, if they're listed, where are the shareholders? You're a great question. Some of them even scale back now on net zero targets because they got shareholders saying, oh, this, can I say, bullshit of ESG, you should go back and focus on the business. I even heard Unilever being criticized for being well, obviously still operating in Russia, but you should focus less on ESG and more on your supply chain and everything. So they have been rowing back a bit. And we need the investors in many of the energy companies which are listed to really, civil society, concerned citizens, activists, to come together to lobby and ask these questions at annual general meetings. Keep emailing them, not because you're Greenpeace necessarily, but you're concerned that there's a gap between the lofty commitments. It is in 2050. I'm sitting in this position in management. I will no longer be around when that's happening. I'm just going to say it. That's greenwash. You're absolutely right. If you tell me you're going to go there in your capex, your capital expenditure, I would like to see a ramping up of this. And if it's not in your financial statements, how do you explain it? Well, phased in approach, whatever the questions are. But you are absolutely right. But also think about it. Who is using the energy? It's us. I mean, they are just supplying what we are using. And I mean, we as in me as a citizen here, me as a company, me as a government institution. Where are these people that pay electricity bills to say, no, we want to go 100% green over the next realistic time frame, 15 years. And we want to classify nuclear energy as a way, as the European Union has done, as a green energy, because we can't see going away from gas. That will happen fast enough. It is also up to us, the people who use the energy from BP, because we love plastics, don't we? It's useful in many, many settings, but it's fossil fuel based in our medical setting, in our cars, whatever it might be. It's more lightweight, so it means when we transport it, less emissions than if it was all glass, for instance. And I'm thinking, this needs to be a conversation that needs to be had from investor level, but also us. So we require less of this information, this energy. And there, many people say, "Oh, no, it's too big, man. I'm just a little mosquito in a wide tent, so I can't make a difference." Apparently, Gandhi said, "If you want to make a difference, think about being a mosquito with a person in a tent, and then you'll see." If not, you bite more and more, and then maybe change will come. So not an easy answer. Great questions. Become an investor in these companies, whatever small, through Revolut or whatever, and then ask these questions. Absolutely right to do that. We need you guys. We need you to also fund the transition to a lower carbon economy. We need your expertise. Why are you not ramping up? What's with these targets being watered down? Absolutely. But we also have to start here. We would like this kind of free, available energy at all points. Difficult conversation. Oh, I'm getting all philosophical here, Valeria. Great question.
Thank you. And there are two more. CO2 equivalent emissions as such are not the problem. The problem is that they end up in the atmosphere. In recent decades, there has been a certain boom in renewables, leading to the reduction in the cost per megawatt of installed capacity and an increase in the efficiency of renewable technologies. Why hasn't there been a similar boom in the development and cost reduction of technologies aimed at 100% absorption of emissions from production and their storage in solid form, CCS technology, for example, in the mines from which these carbons were extracted? Suppose such technologies became available and economically viable, then there would be essentially no problems with thermal generation as such. It would produce zero emissions into the atmosphere. How technically possible is this? And do you expect such technologies to become widespread for thermal generation and other industries with large emissions?
Oh, this is such an easy question, right? Why are you asking me? I'm not an engineer, but I'll gladly give you my take on it. So from everything I read, great question. Carbon capture and storage is currently being piloted in Norway, in the United States, I think in South America, in Central America, and I think one or two Chinese sites. Apparently, it's extremely cost intensive. And I'll just give you an example out of Germany. Where am I? I'm in Cologne. I'm halfway. Compared to Ukraine, Germany is very small. So let's say it's 1,000 kilometers. So if we're going to bury our industry emissions where I am, Cologne, Ruhr area, or where all the big chemicals and the car manufacturers are in the south, they don't have the mines down there. We would need to create giant pipelines to go through all the way to the north into some disused oil field or indeed a disused mine. And you know, democracies, we're going to ask everybody. So how do you feel having such a, just like with nuclear storage, how do you feel having this next to you? All the CO2 being pumped into the underground. Yeah, it's 5,000 meters down, and we will put it in solid form. But if something happens from what I've read, like, I don't know, suddenly we get an earthquake, do you know 100% that everything we pump down might not suddenly be released in one big go, accelerating the woman-man-made climate change? I don't know. I'm not a geologist, but we need to, one, have the storage capacities, two, build an infrastructure so it's capped there where the emissions are. Big chemicals company, big cement producer, energy generator. And then we need to pump it to where it's needed. And from what I can see, that's not next to the factory. That's somewhere else. Can we use existing infrastructure? I have no idea. I hear they say, great, but it's very costly. You talked about being cost effective. Yeah, so let's say we get there. Question is, oh, we don't have to change now. We can just pump it down there and just wonderful. Okay, we say we've got 250 years of coal available if we were to power the world, so we could just extract them. My question is, that's just business as usual, is it not? If we just rely on CCS to do that and not maybe change the way we use energy, the way we reduce it through energy efficiency, don't we need a combination of things? So CCS, I wouldn't rule it out. I can just see a democratic, stakeholder engaged, community engaged, the problems of explaining to them why here. Just like people don't want nuclear power plants next to them, coal power plants next to them, big gas storage facilities or nuclear waste facilities for them. But that doesn't mean it couldn't be done. So yeah, I just fear if we go 100% CCS, well, we can just continue burning everything we want. And who do we know that in the future, what I just said, the tectonic plates shift, suddenly we have an earthquake in Germany or in the North Sea or in the Baltic Sea. And then at once we get 10 years of emissions coming out in 2 days, for instance. What will this do to future generations' ability to choose their own destiny, just like we said in sustainability? Oh, difficult question. In short, let's investigate, let's put it on the table. Can't see it in the near term from everything I've read, but please consult your clever engineer. They probably know more about it. They do know more about
it. Yeah, thank you, Henning. I think it could be like a separate discussion about this
exactly.
question. One more question. A question regarding the motivations of companies to embark on the path of sustainable development and move towards carbon neutrality in their activities. In your opinion, are companies sufficiently informed about the direction of sustainable development, and can increasing the informational field on this topic motivate companies to make decisions towards sustainable development? If you believe that additional information will allow companies to more quickly implement sustainable practices and clean tech projects, what should this information be? And what exactly do companies need, in your opinion?
Yeah, the eternal question, what motivates you to do something which you really don't want to do, but you have to do? So this is like the carrot and the stick. So I've been doing this now for over 26 years, and I must say we have a lot of voluntary initiatives around the world. Why we should do CSR, why we should do a report, why we should engage women to be in management position, get minorities on the board, and so on and so forth. To me, I must say, regulation works. Even if it's a big hammer and every nail is different, we need more regulations around this. We cannot leave it to the enlightened nature of the market, or that your board or your management at some point sees the light and thinks this is a good thing to do. I don't know how much we need to do in terms of communication. Look just to Europe. Look, I mean, dare I say, before the war started, even before 2014, I mean, look at what, no, let's not use the Russian examples. But I just thought, because even there, this regressive culture, the people who really try to do something, they could see the medium and long term. But we are incentivized at management and board level to always do short term. And I'm not going to be around as a director or as a key management in a key management position in the medium to long term. So what incentives do I have to put all this work in now, unless it's tied to my bonuses, as an example just. So, but look at our regulatory landscape. Look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Look at the reports we just talked about, the OECD report. This is something the world community has come down to do. So there's plenty of ammunition. Point them towards that. I mean, just the 3 examples that I had. It's a funny title as well. The triple bottom line, dinner with cannibals, right? Maybe you can trigger 1 or 2 thoughts or conversations. Look at the CSRD, look at some of the reporting, look at what our competition in the West is doing. And to say, and why are they doing this? Because they want just marketing benefits out of it? No, there's clear business benefits, and there's more and more research that comes out that it benefits the bottom line, better loyalty. I don't know, rebuilding Ukraine and the image, and you as a business, you're a small contributor to that, of be the future you want to see. So what does your reporting, what do your processes look like? I mean, do they think about that at all? Or are they in complete crisis mode because of the war? That's, of course, difficult to gauge. But there's plenty of evidence and inspiration to be had if you just look, or you look to the Tech Academy. You look to EBA, if I may mention, the CSR committee, all the work we did there. We really tried to make it practical, fun, and engaging, and always have ideas. Skeptical colleagues tell me this is a lot of BS. How do I overcome that? Well, you could try this. Here's the literature. Look, it's been translated into Ukrainian. And never stop asking the questions. Sustainability means that you are surviving in the long term, financially, socially, environmentally. If you have one big leg that is financial and 2 weak social and environmental legs, how stable is that going to be? Not only from a regulatory point of view, but attracting the talent, implementing the right technology. Shouldn't they all be at least, if not equal, then similar strength? Can you really afford just to look at the financial part, the way you structure your company and your business practices? That time is over. Even in regressive states, Belarus, Russia. That's over. They will see now with all the sanctions. Yeah, a lot more needs to be happening. How they, they have clearly, they have chosen the side. Now they pay for it. Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think that's wonderful. But keeping these out of your mind, those considerations, will in the long term lead to financial, if not disaster, then at least problems. So plant the seed, give them the examples, look at others. And it's a business imperative, not a nice to have imperative. That needs to be stressed at all points.
Thank you, Henning. The answer to that last question was a little bit motivational, even, to our participants.
Well, I try,
You've been holding the attention of our colleagues for 1.5 hours.
Well, I listen. Thank you for spending the time with me. It's fantastic and great questions, guys. You have the knowledge. You're Ukrainians. You're brave. You're motivated. You can do this. But the ESG agenda needs to be your agenda. You need to define that. Learn from others. But what I've learned, I've always said, CSR is different in Ukraine than it is in Germany, in Poland, in Denmark. ESG, the same thing, but there's plenty of inspiration. You are part of our European community. You always were, you always will be. So we are happy to share our knowledge, as in me. And a lot is on the website. And where you find advisors, I'm sure they are linked in with what's happening internationally. They can then advise you. Or you come to the Tech Academy, of course, where you will learn, oh, I look differently at this issue. Hopefully, this was not a lot of blah, blah, blah from me, but just hopefully a call to action. You can do this. And we want to learn from you. I mean, if you get this right under war, tell us how we in this peaceful European Union can be even better at practicing ESG, how you made it work. Your opinion counts. And I really strongly believe, please share it with us. I mean, as in individually with me, not for Birkenstock, but as an ESG expert, because, ESG, sustainability, it's not a job, it's a passion. I know we all get paid, we have bills and stuff, but I had the great fortune to be able to say, I love what I do. And I want to continue to work and learn. And working with you guys in Ukraine, it's a privilege. It's a real privilege. And thanks again, Detect, for inviting me, Valeria. It's amazing. But we need to learn together and share together, because together we can then also do it, even if it's frustrating sometimes. Because in the end, we should all be compared. Cement company in Ukraine, 194 countries, I think we are, in the world, same reporting, same. That's where we want to go. And for that, we need to create the framework that does it. And we are still years apart. In the meantime, let's share. So.
Thank you, Henning. Thank you for highlighting this essential point that ESG is the necessity, the importance for modern businesses aiming to thrive, even in this rapidly evolving market landscape.
Exactly. Not just businesses, also NGOs, any organization really.
NGOs.
Just because you don't make profit, okay, triple bottom line. Instead of finance, well, you need to be financed in order to pay your salaries. So what kind of community value giving? Are you informing? Are you making Ukraine more democratic? What is the other parts to the social and environmental part? This should be for every organization to consider. So it doesn't become the purview of people who look at investors and their needs. Remember, ESG came from investors. This is just a way of filling the buckets, E, S, and G, and then explain to me how they're related with my financial performance or with my donor performance if I'm an NGO. Makes sense to me. I mean, looks good.
Yes, it looks wonderful. Henning, I really see that questions are really deep, and I'm sure that it's not our last conversation.
No, indeed. Feel free, guys. I want to learn from you. Reach out to me. Feel free to share my private email, Valeria, which you have. And just to say thank you, because it's great that you read questions, but maybe if you guys wanted to ask the questions yourself, if you feel comfortable next time, I'm happy to also be invited, if you are translating into English, of course, to just get to your academy sessions to learn from what other practitioners have done. So, cool.
Thank you. Thank you, Henning. Of course, we will share the presentation and with the participants your email. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your support, because it really feels, like even through the screen. Dear colleagues, thank you. We hope that today's insights from our expert really highlighted this necessity and importance of ESG basics notions. Thank you for joining. We wish you to have a safe and warm evening, and see you soon. Goodbye.
And stay safe and healthy. And remember, it will all be yours. All of it. Slava Ukraini.
Slava. Thank you. Thank you.
See you
Goodbye.
later. Bye.
Bye.